Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, December the 2nd, 2025. What does one do when one doesn't have a time of birth? It does happen. Sometimes people want their charts done and they don't know when they're born. They don't know what time they were born. It is surprisingly unusual. Most people do seem to know their time of birth, particularly now. But there's still this question. If one really wants to look at a chart, doesn't have a time of birth, just how does one go about it? And if someone does want their chart read and they really want to know their time of birth, are there any steps they can take? I always sort of advise people, well, first of all, to look at their birth certificate. Very often the time is on the birth certificate. You can also, what else can you do? You can consult the hospital. Sometimes the hospital, has records. There's also relatives who were alive at the time of one's birth. They might have some recollection of what time of day you were born. You at least get the general idea. For example, early morning, late evening. There is a bit of a difference between the two, but sometimes you just don't know. And in terms of these videos, I often look at famous people, powerful people who I want to look at their horoscopes, but I don't have a time of birth, and I have to do what I can. And someone who is in the news a lot is the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I'm not saying he's a particularly interesting or fascinating person, but still, he is Secretary of State. He's, I assume, involved with what's going on in Venezuela. He's also involved in Trump's attempts to, sort out some kind of peace treaty or ceasefire in Ukraine. So, he's a busy man, important man, and I think it would be a good idea to know what's going on in his horoscope. So, yeah, I don't have a time of birth. I know I have a date of birth. I have a place of birth. And in this video, I do want to look at his horoscope and see what one can do. And maybe this is an illustration of what one might be able to do if one doesn't have a time of birth. But before I look at Marco Rubio, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, December the 2nd, 2025. So here is the chart for today, set for noon at New York. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as what is happening, the moon is in Taurus. So the moon is in an earth sign. The moon is the only traditional planet in an earth sign, so it carries a lot of weight on its shoulders. And with the moon in this position, I think it's obviously a fairly fortunate place for the moon to be. After all, the moon is exalted in Taurus, and so it gives us a sense of stability and perhaps being able to be fairly down to earth, and perhaps more down to earth than usual. And of course, moon in Taurus is a sort of a nice balance to all those Sagittarian planets. So now we've got three planets in Sagittarius, Venus, Sun, Mars. So Sagittarius can have all sorts of ideas and can want to do things, and can sometimes be a bit sort of irresponsible and hasty. But moon in Taurus can sort of hold things back and provide a certain amount of stability. And the moon in Taurus, it's kind of making a square to Pluto. That square to Pluto will be more obvious at the beginning of the day, and if you are in Australia or New Zealand. I think if you're in the Americas, that moon square Pluto is pretty marginal unless you're up in very early in the morning. And so that is largely the main things going on. Venus is sextile Pluto, so Venus in Sagittarius making a sextile aspect to Pluto. That aspect is quite a persuasive aspect. It may say something about how we get on with other people, how we relate to them, and I mean it's. I would have said fairly harmless. I mean it might mean that some people can be more persuasive than usual, and we're aware of how we can have an impact through maybe the way we appear or the way we present ourselves. So that's the picture. I would not have said that there was a huge amount going on. I mean, Mercury is now direct, so Mercury is gaining speed, and Mercury at 21 and a half Scorpio is starting to make an aspect between Jupiter and Saturn. So with that grand trine between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn that I was talking about yesterday, is getting stronger, and that might be about the capacity to verbalize. Verbalize, for example, how we see the world, how we see society, how we see the economy. If we have thoughts about the world in which we live and the way people are behaving and the kind of concerns everyone has, especially economic concerns, I think for some of us it might make sense. And if we make the effort to be informed about the world, I think that our efforts will pay off. Turning to the picture for Sydney, Australia, if we set the chart for Sydney as a representative of Australasia, the moon is earlier in the sign at noon. It's in fact it's at 28 degrees Aries. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the first part of the day the moon will be in Aries, and you don't feel that shift from the moon going from Aries until to Taurus until maybe the early afternoon, maybe later in the afternoon, and so there could be a sudden change over the course of a day. Things suddenly become clearer, and there is greater stability, and the impulsiveness of the moon in Aries will sort of transform into the solidness perhaps of the moon in Taurus, and the moon in Taurus does make a square to Pluto. So at the end of the day, that moon square Pluto, you may feel that, and there may be things that you take seriously and that you really want to hold on to. And turning to the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. Don't forget Saturn and Neptune. That heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction is getting closer and closer, now 15 arc minutes apart, because Saturn and Neptune, they don't go retrograde. They only make that conjunction once. And aside from that, well, you can see that the Earth is in Gemini, and of course the Earth is in Gemini, by definition. So if you've got the Sun in Sagittarius, you have the Earth in Gemini. The Earth is kind of making a semi-square to Chiron. There's a semi-square. Always get used to spotting semi-squares. Semi-squares, if you have a planet at 10 or 11, you just add 15. So you add 15 to 10 degrees, 11 degrees Gemini. That gets you to 25, 20 or 26, and then early mutable makes semi-square sesquiquadrates to late cardinal, and so there's our semi-square between the Earth and Chiron. And some of us might feel that we're being held back. There's something we would like to do, something we would like to express, but maybe we feel we can't, and that might hurt. But there is a way, and Chiron does want to be different. And if you feel that it's important to be different, then go ahead. But of course, you don't want to be different just for the sake of it. If it's something that just has to be said, you have to make your opinion clear. Then yeah, that might be the right thing to do. But with Chiron, Chiron, yeah, I keep saying it's a maverick, but it can be a disruptor. And you don't have to be disruptive. I mean, this Earth semi-square Chiron is a fairly regular aspect. I mean, the semi-square conjunction, opposition, square series of aspects, that does happen pretty regularly. Sort of every 6 weeks. So it's not unusual. But this might be a chance to do things which are different, which allow you to stand out. And so now I want to turn to the 12 signs. I'm thinking it might be a day when I say less than usual. Just not much going on. Moon's changing sign, Moon moving from Aries to Taurus. Got Moon square Pluto, Venus sextile Pluto, and really that's it. So these are my forecast for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, December the 2nd, 2025. Aries. Things might not be quite as busy as they have been in the recent past. And the reason for this is that the moon is moving out of your sign. And so as the moon moves out of your sign, you might feel that things are slowing down. And for most of us, certainly if you're in Europe, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, the moon is going to be pretty much in Taurus all day. I mean, if you're in the UK, the moon moves into Taurus at 3:13 a.m. an hour later if you're in Europe. So it's only really if you're in Australia or New Zealand that you have the moon in your sign in a serious way today. Okay, and Asia, but late morning, early afternoon, the moon will switch, even if you are in Asia or Australia or New Zealand. So with the moon moving into Taurus, yeah, you perhaps get a sense of perspective, and whatever you're doing, you might feel a need to somehow stabilize it, to bring it down to earth. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you are completely still, that you're not doing anything. Mars is still moving through Sagittarius, and it's sort of moving into the last decanate of Sagittarius, and so with those planets in Sagittarius, you're still quite active, and you're looking for new opportunities, and you're looking for variety, and you might be more broad-minded than usual, and that's good. But yeah, with the moon moving into Taurus, that does slow things down, and perhaps you want to pause and take stock of things. And I think that is a good idea, and work out whether things are actually possible. Some things might not be possible. Maybe you've had big ideas, things you want to do, things you want to buy, places you want to go to, and with the moon moving into Taurus, there might be a realization that not everything is possible. I mean, it's not a situation where you're going to be, in a state of despair or denying yourself things, but it's just a balance, and it gives you a certain sense of realism. I mean, perhaps a well-needed sense of realism, because I think that recently, over the last couple of days, some Arians have been unrealistic. You have had ideas about what might have been possible. You might have been too keen to listen to people, too keen to listen to some of your own wilder plans. And also, what have people been saying? Some people have been maybe a little bit misleading. They haven't necessarily told you the truth. That's not to say that they're not. I'm not saying anyone's lying, but it might be just difficult to work out exactly what to do. And it's just it has been easy to make a mistake. And perhaps with the moon moving into Taurus, you're less impulsive and more considered, and that means that you're not going to jump into things without carefully going through the consequences. Taurus. The moon is edging into your sign. Okay, it might not happen until early this afternoon if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but if you're in Europe, Africa, the Americas, then the moon will pretty much be in Taurus, for all the day. In the UK, the moon moves into Taurus at 3:13 a.m. So with the moon moving into Taurus, it might be a time when you decide that you have to sort of hold firm. It reminds you of who you are and what kind of things you want to do, and indeed, what is important. Some things are important and some things are just completely trivial, and they can be ignored. But now, Taurus, you do have a degree of seriousness. You are reminded that you have an agenda. I mean, there might be other things to take up your time, other people to be concerned about, but you do know what's important, and you're probably helped by the fact that Venus has now moved into Sagittarius. When Venus was in Scorpio, there might have been times, Taurus, when you did have to pay rather too much attention to what other people were doing or what other people were saying, and certain people were perhaps too complicated for their own good. And now that Venus is in Sagittarius, you can perhaps do things in your own way, and you are serious, and you're able to look at things from a perspective of being an individual. And so with Moon in Taurus, you ask yourself, what is important, and the Moon is making a square to Pluto, and I would regard this square between Moon and Pluto as being positive, provided you handle it in the right way. I mean, Moon square Pluto can be about someone who takes themselves, rather too seriously, and can just be obsessed about certain things just for the sake of it. I mean, that is a possibility, but I don't think it need be a possibility, and it would be perhaps better to see Moon square Pluto as about you and whatever it is that's important to you. What is it that you want to achieve? Where do you want to make your mark? And it's probably just one thing. You don't have to scatter your energies with Moon square Pluto. Moon square Pluto, is about you just giving one thing, just everything you've got. And you will be so focused, so insistent on getting results that other people are probably just going to accept that this is your view, this is your way of looking at things. And so I do think that Moon square Pluto is or at least could be a real positive. Now, all of this doesn't mean that you have to be obnoxious or selfish or self-centered, that you have to ignore other people. I think that your ability to get on with people is actually very good today. I mean, not necessarily in a deep emotional way, not like that, but more being able to say whatever needs to be said. And you're going to be quite good, I think, at saying the right thing, especially when dealing with people you don't know. You've just met them. What do you say? How do you create a contact? I think you can create a contact, and I think that your verbal skills will be quite solid. Yes, Mercury is in Scorpio, your opposite sign, and so Mercury is about how everyone communicates, and if it's in your opposite sign, I think to a great extent you do know what to say, and so I think you can create the right impression and do enough. I think that is the important point when it comes to other people. You can do enough to make the connection. I mean, you don't have to go all the way, and you certainly don't have to show huge amounts of emotion. Gemini. Don't forget, Gemini, Mercury is moving towards the trines of Jupiter and Saturn, and it does mean we've got a grand trine. And I think that as far as is possible, Gemini, you should, try to tune into the energies of this grand trine. I mean, it's potentially an important grand trine, and there may be, things that you become aware of, and you're able to articulate them, at least articulate them to yourself. I mean, that's probably the important point. It's not that you have to say a huge amount. I mean, remember, Mercury is moving through Scorpio. Scorpio is a mute sign, and of course Geminis do like to talk, but maybe, Gemini, you'll do your best work silently. I know that is difficult if you are someone that talks too much. I mean, I can't do this video silently with my sun in Gemini, but maybe there are other things I can do silently. But you can understand things, and understanding really does matter, Gemini, at the moment, because there's a lot around you which is misleading. It's very, very difficult to understand what's happening, and I'm not talking just about your own life. I'm talking about just the world in which you live. There are a lot of false signals, and sometimes, Gemini, you're in a situation where only you can make the decisions. Only you can decide what's important. You can listen to other people's opinions as long as you like, and it may seem that everyone is saying the same thing. And what are you looking at? When if everyone is saying the same thing, you have to ask yourself why. Is it because other people know more than you? I mean, that's something that Geminis don't like to think. You don't like to think that could be a possibility, and it certainly feels at the moment, perhaps, that you are at a disadvantage when it comes to knowledge and analysis. But I think that would be misleading. I think you do understand what's happening, even if you feel that you don't. And so maybe you should listen to your own advice. You should listen to your own vibes and your own feelings. And, if you have thought about the matter enough, I think that you will come to the right conclusions. And that's perhaps something that you need to work on over the next few days. And also, Gemini, don't doubt yourself. You are someone who does have a lot of power right now, and you can project this power, but in quite a subtle way. You don't have to be here, there, and everywhere. You don't have to be at the center of things. You don't have to be talking too much, as I've just said. Persuasion can work on many levels, and if you want to be a powerful, persuasive person, you probably have to think about yourself first. You have to center yourself, and you cannot center yourself if you're surrounded by other people, if you spend all your time listening to other people's advice and opinions. And you could do that. I mean, there are 3 planets in Sagittarius, Venus, Sun, Mars, in your opposite sign. So there's a temptation with that Sagittarian build-up to put other people first, to give other people the choice. What initiative do they want to take, and then you can follow. This is all rather undignified for a Gemini, and so Gemini, do think about how you can put yourself first and avoid confusion, because you don't want to be confused. Geminis can get confused because you take on too much information, and I think in the end you can probably trust yourself to reach the right conclusions. Cancer. I don't think that it's going to be an especially active or busy day. I don't think it has to be. And, I don't say that in a negative sense. I think in a way it's quite a good thing. Why do you want to be pushed and pulled, this way and that? You can, to an extent, listen to what other people are saying. In fact, you can be quite sociable if you want to be. I mean, the moon is in Taurus. There's something about you that is, very down to earth at the moment, and a lot of people will appreciate that you can help people to to relax and to get things in perspective, and you're not in so much of a hurry. At least you give the appearance of not being in so much of a hurry. And if you give people a bit of your time, I do think that would be much appreciated. Although there are limits to your patience. I mean, the moon is making a square to Pluto, and so with moon square Pluto, yeah, you try to be sociable. You're quite successful in that direction. But with moon square Pluto, there's always something that's being held back. What is being held back? Maybe you are holding something back. Maybe someone else is holding something back. But something is not as open as it should be. And I don't think that you need to worry about that, and you shouldn't expect people to reveal everything. And maybe it's just an advantage to just know that some things are being hidden, and if you know something that things are being hidden, then that just makes things a lot easier. And at the same time, you perhaps are of the view that the real work is what you want to do, what you feel is important. And there are things you have to sort out, there are things you'd like to sort out, and the question is, are other people going to be in a position to help? I don't think necessarily. Do you want anyone to help? Probably not. And so the Cancer, give people some of your time, but you don't have to give people all of your time. And there are going to be limits to your patience. You can't be patient with everyone, and you state your view, they state their view, and that might be enough. Now, one aspect that is starting to make itself felt is the grand trine between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. Now, this grand trine isn't exact for a few days, but Mercury is starting to make a trine to Jupiter, making a trine to Saturn, and this aspect may be making you perhaps verbally playful. I think your sense of humour is going to start to be on quite good form. It's starting, over the next few days, and it's not that you have to sort of make everyone laugh, but your response could be quite effective, and you'll know what to say, and you're not going to be entirely light-hearted, but still you know how to amuse, and that might be something that could be surprising. Sometimes Cancerians can be quite defensive. They don't reveal everything, and you're not being asked to reveal everything, but sometimes a few words, a bit of humour comes out, and you also perhaps can show some mental versatility, which again that might seem to be surprising. You are, though, mentally versatile all the time. I mean, that is a feature of many Cancerians, a surprising feature, perhaps. People have a stereotypical view of Cancerians, that they are looking after themselves, they want to do things properly, and they perhaps aren't going to waste time by talking too much or writing too much, but you do have a way with words. And I think that with this grand trine in water signs, I think that this verbal facility, both in terms of a spoken and a written word, is going to start to come into its own. Leo. I think, Leo, that you may be wondering, what needs to be done. It just may be that something needs to be done, and you're not entirely sure what it is, but you still know that something is important. And this is particularly the case when the moon moves into Taurus. And so when the moon moves into Taurus, you get a new focus, particularly as the moon makes a square to Pluto. So moon square Pluto, how do you stand out? How do you demonstrate your individual power? And this is going to be especially the case in terms of work or career. If you're going into work today, you want to make an impression, and you might feel that there's something that has to be done, and it needs to be done as fast as possible. And you're also aware of what might apparently prevent you from getting things done. And with moon square Pluto, you might have a certain concern about other people. Certain people may be having more power than you'd like them to. They may be trying to assert control. But the question is that in your imagination, or is it real? I mean, it might be a figment of your imagination. That is, absolutely possible with this aspect between the moon and Pluto, because Pluto is in Aquarius. It's in your opposite sign, and that can represent your ideas about the outside world, not necessarily the truth. And so if you do feel that anything is holding you back, or anybody is holding you back, ask yourself what's going on. Is it true, or could it just be a figment of your imagination? And you are more sensitive than usual at the moment, Leo. I mean, you can pick things up, you can understand things, and you have to make sure that you use this sensitivity correctly. You can be oversensitive. You can pick up on things from other people, their vibes, the emotional energy they're giving off. You can certainly pick up on it all. But the question is, do you interpret it correctly? And this is perhaps the problem of being a psychic. I mean, I of course never claimed to be a psychic, but a lot of people do claim to be psychic. I mean, maybe all of us have sort of psychic abilities, and psychic abilities are seen as being something useful. But this is not always the case. People can be very, very psychic. They can be telepathic, pick up on thoughts, feelings, memories, and it doesn't do them any good. They can be, overwhelmed by it all. I mean, I think this is why, if you read what people have said, I don't know, maybe Rudolf Steiner or Dion Fortune. I don't know, Dion Fortune. She was an occultist, but in a kind of quite vague way. And the grounding process is quite important for a psychic, and that is a constant theme in sort of the occult literature of how you ground yourself, and the possibility of being overwhelmed. I mean, Israel Regardie, who was involved with the Golden Dawn, he talked about the chattering of the unconscious, and he recommended that anyone, or not even recommended, I thought it was an absolute essential that anyone who wanted to get into the occult, getting involved in the Golden Dawn, they had to go into therapy. Because Israel Regardie was, I think he was a Reichian psychotherapist, and the reason he was telling people to go into therapy is because they had to ground themselves, because you have to be quite grounded to get involved in the occult. It might sound strange, but if you're not grounded, you can go mad. And maybe this is part of what is happening. I mean, sorry, I'm not saying you're going to go mad or anything like that. I'm, of course, exaggerating a bit here, but I'm just talking about sensitivity and how to deal with sensitivity. And Just because you are sensitive, just because you're psychic, doesn't necessarily mean you're picking up anything useful. You might pick up a lot, but you just can't sort it out. And that's the reason for why it's important to be grounded. And perhaps that it's helpful that the fact that the moon is in Taurus, because that at least we've got one traditional planet in an Earth sign. But still, Leo, if you feel that you understand something, you feel that you really get it, you may indeed be right, but you also have to be grounded, and you have to sort out, what is, as Ezrael Regardie would talk about, that unconscious chattering. Is that unconscious chattering, or is it something real that you're picking up? So that's something perhaps over the course of the day that you might have to work out. Virgo. It's nice that we've got the moon in an earth sign, moon moving into Taurus, and of course, Virgo is an earth sign, and so when the moon moves into Taurus, that just makes things easier. And as a Virgo, you might have really been feeling the fact that there weren't any planets in earth signs. Being a Virgo, you want some kind of grounding. You want to know what's real, and sometimes it's just been very difficult to know, what's going on. And now it's becoming clearer. And if you have any sort of spiritual lodestone, something spiritual that you keep addressing, that becomes clearer. And spirituality doesn't have to be some sort of pie in the sky nonsense. It can be something very real, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking almost for evidence, and perhaps that evidence is there. And for sure, you are becoming more sensitive, and you are picking up on things because Mercury is your ruler. It's in Scorpio. I mean, that is a very sensitive place for Mercury to be. It's going direct. It's applying to a trine of Jupiter and Saturn over the next few days. So over the next few days, Virgo, I think that you're going to be able to really understand, what is happening. And I was talking about this issue to Leo just now, and I was saying to Leo that Leo had to be careful, that Leo shouldn't trip themselves up by getting overwhelmed by the information coming in, the emotional information coming in. I don't think for you that's so much of a problem. I mean, you have to think about what you are good at, and what you are good at, Virgo, or at least what you can be good at, is sorting out the wheat from the chaff. I mean, that is a critical Virgoan skill, and one of the key words for Virgo when you're learning about astrology and what the signs are, one of the key words for Virgo was discrimination. Of course, not discrimination as in discriminating against people, but instead discriminating about in terms of what is important and what can be just disregarded. And so that ability to discriminate, Virgo, is pretty good at the moment. And with Mercury making a trine to Jupiter and Saturn, you increasingly have the ability to just understand, what is happening. You might think about it like the news. I mean, we are bombarded with news, and Virgo, over the next few days, you're able to sift that news, with your mind and your heart to an extent, and work out, what is important and what you need to, pay attention to. And additionally, Virgo, I think that you're quite powerful at the moment. You have a very good ability to project yourself. You come over as being convincing, that you know what you're talking about, and so don't be shy. Don't feel that you need to hold things back. Okay, you don't have to be a crazy extrovert, but if you are serious and you you're able to really engage. I think you can engage. People will take you seriously because you've got something important to say, I think. Libra. Venus is making a sextile to Pluto. So we got Venus in Sagittarius making a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius, and it's quite a powerful aspect. I mean, it's not a dynamic aspect. I mean, it's not like a Venus square Pluto. It's an aspect which is more about your skills and your natural ability, and what you can do well. And Libra, what you can do well is persuade. You can come over as someone who is very convincing. And one reason you're convincing is maybe because you know what to reveal and you know what to keep to yourself. I mean, there is something at the moment, Libra, which is rather secretive. You don't want to give everything away at once, but you can give away just enough to come over as being a convincing person and be the kind of person that does need to be taken seriously. And if you make any efforts in the social realm or the creative realm as well, I think that you can really do a good job, and you're going to be very good at communicating what is important to you. And as a result, people are not just going to like you, but I think they'll respect you as well. And there is, as I've just said, there is a seriousness to you. You are keeping things back, and I think that means because you can just keep a tight ship, that you are taken seriously. So you take yourself seriously, other people take you seriously, and at the same time you haven't lost your sense of fun, and you can be quite a convincing communicator. And so overall, Libra, I would have said that things are looking pretty good, and there should be no bounds to what can be discussed. I think you can discuss whatever is important to you, and you shouldn't be afraid of things which may be quite material. You need to maybe think about money, your work, business, whatever is important to you. You don't be ashamed of regarding something as being important to you. You might, for example, think that something, you might regard something as being important, but you might not want to talk about it because you might think other people might regard it as being trivial. Maybe it's a smaller amount of money or something, some little detail that does bother you, but you don't want to bring it up. Well, I would bring it up. If you think that something is important enough and to think about, then it's important enough to talk about, again, without revealing anything, without revealing too much. And you can get that balance right, making your opinions clear, making your desires clear, but also maintaining your boundaries. So overall, Libra, it does look like a day which is pretty constructive. Scorpio. There is a certain emphasis on other people as the day progresses. I mean, that can't be avoided because the moon is moving through Taurus. Taurus is, after all, your opposite sign, and so when the moon is in Taurus, you're aware of what people are doing and what they're saying, and the moon is making a square to Pluto. Particularly at the beginning of the day, particularly if you're in Australia, and if for moon with this moon square Pluto. There's a bit of irritation here. I mean, you know that certain people have to be taken seriously. Yeah, that's true. But square Pluto, part of you just wants to keep yourself to yourself. You want to hold on to what you have, and you don't want to reveal too much. And that's probably a good idea. I mean, if you spend too much time worrying about what other people are doing, what games they're playing, then Scorpio, you could lose touch with reality, because not everyone is being clear, not everyone is telling the truth. It's possible that some people are being deceptive, and it's important that you're aware of that. So if you're told something, just don't take it at face value. I mean, it might be true, it might not be true, but you need to have a certain amount of grounding, and you need to make sure that you have your sacred earth, the sacred earth to which you can retreat to, a place where you can contemplate and evaluate. Because if you just give other people free rein, as there is some temptation to do that, if you give people free rein, you're going to be dissatisfied. And as I've already suggested, not everyone is being honest and open. Some people are keeping things to themselves, and if they are saying anything, there is a scope for the truth being distorted. But you're a Scorpio. I think that if anyone is being untruthful, is trying to confuse you, you have the capacity to understand what's going on. But in order to have that capacity, you need to have a certain sense of grounding, and you have to be able to always retreat to your sacred earth, so that you can work things through and ensure that you're not blown off course by other people's nonsense. Sagittarius. Well, we obviously have a lot of planets in Sagittarius, 3 planets in Sagittarius, and that inevitably is going to have an influence. It does mean, Sagittarius, that at the moment you're very much into projecting yourself. I mean, I think you've got a lot to project. I don't mean project in a psychological Freudian sense. I mean, I'm talking about just projecting who you are. So there's a lot to project, and there's a lot of good you can do through this projection. It is the Sagittarian season. The Sagittarian season is in full swing, and so if you've got something to offer, something to contribute, then by all means go ahead. But the moon is in Taurus, and with the moon in Taurus, that it does provide a certain, how should I put it, a counterweight, a different view. I mean, moon in Taurus is quite a stabilizing influence, and that every now and then you have to make sure that things are in order. You can be as active as you like, but if your immediate surroundings are becoming increasingly chaotic, well, you're going to become less and less powerful, and you are going to sort of lose power. And so Moon in Taurus is encouraging you to just sort things out, and to make sure that your foundations are on good form. And I think they can be on good form. So you have to be able to act from a position of strength, and to an extent, a position of stability, where you feel comfortable in your own skin, comfortable in your own body, and comfortable in your own surroundings. And the moon in Taurus is going to allow all of that to happen. And you don't want to take things too far. And that can be a problem with all those planets in Sagittarius. You might overstep the mark. And yesterday we had a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter. Of course, Jupiter is your ruler, and that Sun Jupiter sesquiquadrate, which I talked about yesterday, it was taking place on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So that does mean that Jupiter, as a slower planet from the Sun, is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And Jupiter on the Mars-Uranus midpoint just might encourage you to take a step too far, exaggerate, do something that is not necessarily advisable. It might even be unsafe. So Sagittarius, I would recommend that you don't do anything careless or risky that it wasn't pre-planned. So if you have a sudden inspiration to do something, you don't necessarily do it. If it's not part of a plan, if you haven't prepared yourself, if you haven't rehearsed it, then it might be better to leave it for another day. So Sagittarius, there are a few things to watch out for today, and you certainly don't want to take things too far. But if you give yourself grounding, which I think you can do, if you ground yourself in reality and you make sure that you feel comfortable, then I think that everything else should flow from that stability, and I don't think that things should be too bad. Capricorn, I think you have a better sense of what is going on. I think that maybe over the last day or two, there may have been things happening around you which weren't entirely clear. You weren't always sure how to respond. It wasn't that you were confused or anything like that. It was just that it seemed perhaps slightly alien. This is not really what you wanted to get involved with, and perhaps you just wanted to keep your distance. And things are changing a bit because the moon is moving into Taurus, and moon is moving into an earth sign, and so with the moon moving into Taurus, it's likely that things are just making more sense, and also perhaps you're better able to interact and engage and even enjoy what is going on. Perhaps because there's a greater sense of understanding, on your part. And so if you want to participate on your terms, I think that is okay, but it is on your terms, and you shouldn't assume that you understand everything. And there are certain things which you perhaps shouldn't try to understand. And if something is outside your experience, then probably it should be avoided. I think that that is the right approach, because I think there's just a small danger, Capricorn, that you might get dragged down a path that you don't understand. Dragged by what? Dragged by your curiosity, maybe, or outside pressure. But if something seems unusual, it might be glamorous, might be attractive, but doesn't mean to say that you have to get involved. And ideally, Capricorn, you will think about today, Tuesday, you'll think about what you were planning on doing today, and you will do it, and you won't stray off the beaten path. I think that is quite important. That doesn't mean to say that things are going to be boring. It doesn't mean to say you are going to be boring. I think that you are going to be able to respond very well to whatever you meet, and I think that your own creativity will have its own power, and you can really make the most of whatever you're doing. But you don't have to do everything, and you certainly don't have to give in to outside pressure. And I think that if you can perhaps meet people halfway, and you don't have to get drawn into their world, and who knows what's going on in other people's world, but you don't have to get drawn in. And perhaps the best approach, Capricorn, is to just work on the surface, without ever getting too deeply into things, and all the while keeping in mind what is important to you. And there is a sextile aspect between Venus and Pluto, and this Venus-Pluto sextile might give you the opportunity to understand something in your own quiet way, which could be very useful. Something that could relate to your work, or something you're trying to achieve, and you understand it. You don't have to say anything, that you just get it. It suddenly makes sense, and it's almost the case that you were just seeing something that other people didn't see. Maybe you see something you weren't supposed to see, or you hear something, some casual comment that seems meaningless, but when you think about it again, you see that something is going on, and you perhaps see that there is an opportunity there. Aquarius. As the moon moves into Taurus, moves out of Aries into Taurus, you might feel that you need to sort of back off a bit. There's perhaps a sense that you don't want to get too heavily involved, and what you can trust is yourself and your own world, what's going on in your own world, and you can trust all of that. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't have to do anything today. And if you're feeling happy, you're feeling comfortable, then keep it like that. And it really could be said that there is nothing more to be said, nothing more to be advised, nothing more to be forecast, and that's it. I mean, you are probably, Aquarius, going to be most powerful on your own territory. If you stray onto outside territory, onto someone else's territory, into someone else's field of expertise, then you could be at a disadvantage. So, Aquarius, it's important to stick to what you know and trust, and be aware of your own power and where your power lies. You can't be powerful everywhere, and do stick to your strengths. And it's certainly not a day for trying out something new, and particularly if it's important. Because if you try out something new, someone can do it better than you. Why take the risk? It might seem like fun. It might seem like an interesting novelty, but you've got nothing to gain, and probably quite a lot to lose. And in general, Aquarius, there is a danger that you could be tempted off the track. You could be tempted to go into areas that you're not familiar with, and you might find these areas very interesting. Aquarians can be curious. You want to know more stuff. You want to find out what's going on somewhere else. But if you were to do that, then I think that you might have cause for regret. So Aquarius, that's more reason to sort of stick to the straight and narrow. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't be sociable up to a point. I mean, you can. You've got three planets in Sagittarius. Got Venus just moved into Sagittarius, and with Venus moving into Sagittarius, there's no doubt that your social abilities are good, and that you can enter into the spirit of things, whatever that spirit might be. But you don't want to enter into the spirit of things too much. You don't want to get to the point where you lose a sense of where you're going, where you're being sort of carried along by the crowd or by whatever the prevailing energies might be. And finally, just don't forget that the Mercury is starting to make a trine to Jupiter and Saturn. Over the next few days, we do have a grand trine between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. Mercury is the last planet left in Scorpio. We did have a lot of planets in Scorpio. Mercury is still there, still hanging out in Scorpio, and so while Mercury is in Scorpio, do take advantage of it. And it just may be that this is a time, Aquarius, when you can still think about where you want to go, where your direction lies. And with those trines to Jupiter and Saturn, I think that you just know where it's all going. And if you give yourself a chance to think about your environment, the place you live, the society in which in which you exist, then I think your next moves should be fairly obvious. Pisces, your ability to talk is pretty good at the moment. You can say what's on your mind, and you can get to the truth of the matter, pretty easily. I mean, I think that there is something quite persistent about you. So if you're asking a question and you don't get the answer you're looking for, I think that you can keep asking, and you can keep reframing or rephrasing the question until you do find what you're looking for. And you're helped by the fact that the moon is making a square to Pluto, and so with this moon square Pluto, your ability to get past the surface is going to be pretty good. So if there's anything that you need to know, you want to know, then I think that you will find what you're looking for. And you don't have to make too much of an effort. You don't have to go out of your way. I think that's quite important. You don't want to go out of your way. I mean, if you go out of your way and you move on to strange territory, well, it does become more difficult. And you don't want to take risks. I mean risks. Remember. Yesterday there was a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter. Now that sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter is fading. It's certainly not as strong as it used to be. It's pretty marginal. But that sesquiquadrate between Sun and Jupiter was on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and Jupiter is still on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and so. With Jupiter on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, it may be, Pisces, that you're just tempted to take something too far. You want to do something, you feel it's the right thing to do, it seems exciting, you do it, but something might go wrong. And it might not just be about excitement. I mean, there may be a tension that needs to be answered. You feel that you have to do something, and you do it, and the results are not necessarily quite what you expected. So I would avoid doing anything that is at all risky, that involves any kind of danger. And when it comes to doing the physical side of things, tread carefully, move carefully, and don't feel that everything has to be done at once, because it's not an active day. It needn't be an active day. And you can go places if you want to, but you shouldn't be going to places that are a long way away. Keep it local. A bit of movement around your community. That should probably be, as far as it goes. And don't go more further afield. Don't go further afield. Is that right? More further afield than you have to, because as soon as things become unfamiliar, that's when the difficulties might arise. And just going back to this curiosity. It is important to be curious, but the question is, what do you have to do to find things out? I mean, that is the question. It's just, you shouldn't have to go out of your way, and it just may be that if you just stay where you are, the information will come your way, and the inspiration will come your way as well, because Mercury is starting to make a trine to Jupiter, and that trine to Jupiter, I'll be talking more about that when it's exact, but that Mercury trine Jupiter is fortunate at a number of levels, and it could be fortunate in terms of your ideas and your development as a person. It can also say something about relationships, and with Mercury starting to trine Jupiter, that could indicate that you and someone else have an opportunity for a fortunate interaction. It could be that you've attracted someone's attention, and so there could be changes, fortunate changes with that. So do look around you, see who is trying to get in touch with you, who is trying to make contact, and it might be a situation where you can benefit. So while it's important to be cautious, you don't want to completely restrict yourself, because there are certain people and events that could be not just useful, but they really may sort of buoy your spirits if you give them a chance. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 18, which is illness. Now, I don't mean you're going to get ill. This hexagram is called, by Wilhelm calls this hexagram work on what has been spoilt. Greg Winkup calls it illness. I mean, the advantage of illness is it's short. Work on what has been spoilt is not short. Illness indicates that something is wrong, and I Ching is not saying that it's an illness that's going to go on forever, but it's just it's an illness in fact which can for sure be cured. And okay, it may be that today, Tuesday, you're going to feel under the weather. That's certainly possible. Or you just might feel that something is wrong. Something, maybe could have been done better, or there were mistakes in the past. And, the question is, what do you do about it? And that gives us this idea of working on what has been spoiled. And spoiled, do look at everything around you. I mean, one image that you can use with this hexagram is a can of worms. Something has gone rotten, something's gone moldy. I mean, it may literally be that something has gone moldy. Look at your fridge, for example. Maybe there's something that's been rotting away, that's been slowly turning different colors, and so that's it. Or it just could be something you have noticed around you that's been decaying, and you just haven't noticed it. You've just missed it. And if you had dealt with it earlier, it may just be maintenance or something like that. So if anything needs to be maintained, or should have been maintained, just have a look around you. Everything that maybe something that's been exposed to the elements, and it hasn't been properly looked after, or something's been left out, or it could just be a situation in your own life that you have not been taken seriously enough. You sort of didn't want to look at it, and this is telling you, do look at it. That's what you should be doing. And we have two moving lines. We have the fourth line moving, we have the fifth line moving, and the fourth line moving is very much a problem from the past that has been ignored. And by the time you realize it just could be almost too late to sort it out. And maybe you just wanted an easy life. You didn't want to engage it. You thought, well, it's going to look after itself. Just wait. It'll be fine. And maybe you're starting to realize it's not fine. Now, the fifth line moves as well. And the fifth line, well, the image we have here with the fifth line is looking after one's father, looking after one's sick father. And this is seen to be a very credible thing to do. Well, obviously it is, looking after a sick father. I'm not saying you've got a sick father. But what it's really saying is, with the father, I mean, obviously this is the I Ching, and so we're talking about the Confucian way of looking at society. Mother, father, children. The father can also be symbolic of the past, and it can be about what the father has done wrong in the past. the mistakes the father has made, and one is now trying at some level to fix them. And whatever one is doing, looking after the father, looking after something, maybe looking after someone, is seen as being incredible, is being seen as being entirely credible, absolutely the right thing to do. And you get praise for this, and there's an opportunity here to very much sort the problem out. So the fourth line is about leaving it too late. The fifth line is perhaps waking up. We've got a problem here. Let's deal with it. The problem might have been going on for years, but I'm going to sort it out, and it's going to be fine because I'm going to put in the work, and everyone notices what you're doing, and you get the credit. And two lines moving means we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 44, which is coming to meet. And I wonder about this coming to meet, because, we're trying to solve something here, but in the process of trying to solve something, we might do a good job, but get ourselves into a situation which is not at all what we want to get ourselves into. And it does indicate a certain level of dependence. And certainly if you're trying to solve something, you need to do it you largely need to do it yourself. And if anyone comes along offering to help, then that should probably be avoided. And I think as far as is possible, we need to be independent. We need to kind of be aware of what we have done wrong, be honest about it. But that doesn't mean we have to tell other people necessarily. And if we can sort it out on our own, so much the better, because coming to meet just indicates that we put ourselves into a situation where we do become dependent. Coming to meet represents another person who is very keen to get involved in our life. And, it might seem very easy to bring someone into our life. And it could be, for example, we spend too much time listening to, what other people are saying. So, for example, let's say you've got a problem, and it's a problem that has come about through your own neglect. And let's say it appears to be a practical or material problem. One might, for example, decide one wants to go onto the internet and go to I don't know, forums, go to Reddit or whatever, ask questions, see what other people have to say. And that might seem to be a useful thing to do. And maybe you get replies. Maybe other people are responding to a current situation and on the internet. And you can just get tied up with it all, because it's so easy to be influenced by other people, to be to just not take responsibility for your own problem, and look for a solution from outside. And so that's why it's important to be self-reliant. If there are solutions, as far as is possible, you have to find those solutions yourself. You have to kind of be your own doctor. I don't mean that literally. I mean, if you really are sick, then you have to go and get medical attention. But if it's something, if I'm talking about symbolic illness, symbolic decay, something that has gone wrong, it is down to you. You have the solutions in your hands, and if you look for solutions elsewhere in terms of asking other people's advice, then I don't think you're going to find the right solutions. In fact, you could make things worse. And finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Marco Rubio. I'm not saying, by the way, that I find Marco Rubio particularly interesting. But, he is Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State. So, he is, he's an important person, and he's an influential person. And, we don't have his time of birth. We didn't have the time of birth of his predecessor, Anthony Blinken, which was kind of frustrating, not having Anthony Blinken's chart. So so as far as here is Marco Rubio's chart, as far as I know. So if I have a chart where I don't have a time, I just use a midday chart, and he was born in Miami. So this is noon, Miami, May the 28th, 1971. It's an average. It's an average of his chart. So, for example, it means that the moon, I'm not going to be more than 6 degrees out in terms of where his moon actually is, and as far as my attempts to find out his birth time, I go to astro.com. I see if they've got a birth chart of him. They have got a birth chart of him. They have a rating, and if they don't have a time of birth, they have an X, and he's an X, no time of birth. I'm sure someone could ask him, but maybe. There are other ratings. If I see a double A or an A or a B, then I will go for the time of birth on astro.com. If it's a C, I don't generally go for C's or D's as dodgy data, DD. So there are all sorts of ratings, but Marco Rubio is an X. That's all we've got to go on. So, here is his chart, and he was born sun in Gemini. And the moon, we don't know where his moon is. That's a real problem. So his at noon, moon was at 2848 Cancer, and that means his moon could be anywhere between approximately 22 Cancer and 4 degrees Leo. On the balance of probability would suggest that he has the moon in Cancer. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. My immediate feeling, just looking at Rubio, I don't know a lot about Rubio. I was thinking there was something rather Moon and Leo about him, particularly in his debates with Donald Trump in 2016? Or was it 2016? 2016 or 2016. I mean, there's somehow something a bit fragile about Moon in Leo, which there can be a bit fragile, but I'm absolutely not going to speculate. I don't know whether, chances are statistically he's got the moon in Cancer, but we have to assume we don't know where his moon is, unfortunately. But he does have the sun in Gemini, and I don't think he strikes me as being a particularly Gemini sort of Quicksilver, kind of person. And maybe with Rubio, we have to look at the whole spread of his planets. Remember, we don't know his rising sign, but he has 3 planets in Taurus. He has Mercury, Venus, and Saturn in Taurus. So there is something pretty Taurean about him. He sort of sticks to things, and he is persistent. He's got a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Taurus. So Mercury-Venus is a great aspect. It's quite verbal. He can communicate. I mean, he's a lawyer. He's a politician. I mean, he's not an inspiring communicator, but he's obviously clever. If he wasn't clever, he wouldn't have got to the position he was in. And he is persistent. He has his Mercury Venus is square Mars, and I'm thinking that with that square to Mars, there's possibly a certain anger to him that perhaps is going to be quite repressed. He's not going to express that anger. He doesn't seem to be sort of such an angry person, but I think he does have a lot of anger and resentment there. And I said about Antony Blinken, when I was looking at his chart, I thought there was something petulant about Antony Blinken. I don't think that Rubio is as petulant as Antony Blinken is, but maybe that Mars squaring Venus and Mercury might create a certain amount of petulance. Notice his Mars is on a north node, so being combative is perhaps his destiny, something he needs to develop. So Mars conjunct the North Node, maybe about him being assertive, standing up for whatever it is that he believes in. And so that may be one way in which that works. So Venus square Mars, you could say that is quite good for a politician. I mean, Venus square Mars can provide attractiveness to certain elements of the electorate. It can also repulse certain elements of the electorate. I think if you're he did of course try to become a presidential candidate in 2016. Of course Trump beat him along with a load of other people, and so that Venus square Mars is certainly trying hard to appeal to certain people in the electorate, and with some success. I mean, he was elected a senator, but so far, that's as far as he's got in terms of his elective success. Now, he's got a sun in Gemini. Now, you could say with the sun in Gemini that he has a certain amount of versatility, which I don't think his predecessor Antony Blinken had. Marco Rubio, for example, is prepared to go and talk to the Russians. He might not like the Russians, but he's prepared to go to Moscow and talk to them. That would be Sun in Gemini. That's always something Sun in Gemini can do. But that Sun in Gemini is trine Uranus. So that Sun trine Uranus, a Sun also trine true black moon Lilith. So what exactly is he going to get involved in? And Sun trine Uranus, if you've got Sun trine Uranus as someone who is Secretary of State, where does this all lead in the end? What kind of crises in the end is he going to get involved in? Now, one characterization of Marco Rubio is that he is a neocon. I mean, he is a Cuban American, and being a Republican Cuban American, he obviously is going to have strong feelings about Cuba, wanting to keep up the pressure on Cuba, wanting to stamp out Cuba's influence. So you can see why someone like Rubio might be very keen to overthrow the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And of course, he'd be really happy if he could overthrow the communist regime in Cuba. And so the ideology of that might be linked with the fact that he's got a conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune. I mean, he's got Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter in Sagittarius is, it's a very ideological placement for Jupiter. Particularly if you're a politician, and he has a strong sense of what is right. This is the right form of government. In this case, the American way is right. Jupiter conjunct Neptune may be quite idealistic about it. So, when he looks at someone like Venezuela, he would be sure, or Cuba, he's sure, well, the American way, is the best way, and the sun is widely opposition his Jupiter and Neptune. So that might be saying something about how that works, and and how that develops. So as far as what is going on in Rubio's chart, it's a problem. I don't have what's going on right now. It really is a problem, because I don't have a time of birth for him, and it's irritating. But we do know, for example, that Uranus is going to be doing stuff. I mean, Uranus has just gone back into Taurus. So he's about to have Uranus, getting fairly close to his Saturn in Taurus. So he's got Uranus is going to be doing that. So that's happening early next year. So Saturn might be his boundaries, the way he would like to be doing things, and then Uranus crosses his Saturn, and he's perhaps having to move outside his comfort zone, and then Uranus goes back into Gemini. And so when Uranus goes back into Gemini, well, it will straight away make oppositions to his Jupiter-Neptune opposition. So his Jupiter-Neptune opposition, that could be his ideology. I mean, he is the one of the leading neocons in Trump's cabinet. He is probably a block on coming to a deal with Russia. A proper deal with Russia. Trump had this agreement at Anchorage, and we don't know why that agreement wasn't. He kind of backpedaled on it as soon as he talked to Europeans and to NATO, and probably his neocons, including people like Rubio. So probably Rubio is uncomfortable with this whole thing, and it does. The neocon here is very much that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, a fantasy about what America is about, America's projection of its power, and also, the American way is the right way. So I think that's how you can see this. And so Uranus, when it goes back into Gemini in sort of April of next year, will be making the opposition to that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And in 2027, I think, by the end of 2026, I think Uranus gets very close to the conjunction of Uranus. I think it goes stationary sometime at the end of 2026, very close to Rubio's Uranus. Uranus within a degree, I think, of Rubio's Sun. So that would indicate quite a tempestuous year. And then 2027, that's when things start to get quite complicated for him. So that is a way of looking at his chart. I've looked at elemental balances. I don't see anything particularly spectacular with elemental balances, although, of course, if he has his moon in Leo rather than Cancer, we won't know. If he had his moon in Leo rather than Cancer, that would mean he would have no water in his chart. If he has his moon in Cancer, then the moon in Cancer would have to bear the whole watery side of his personality. And when you've got a singleton planet in an element, I think that planet can become very important, and it can perhaps be shown in his emotionality. Clearly, thinking about it, it's difficult to know, is his moon in Leo or Cancer? In terms of when you look at him and almost his appearance, his face, I can see a bit of Cancer in his face. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but maybe Cancer rising. There's no reason to think he's got Cancer rising, but maybe that's a moon in Cancer, and there is an emotionality to him, but it's not well expressed, and I think that was shown in his debate with Trump in 2016. And so looking at his solar arc directions, so here's Rubio's solar arc directions. I've moved things forward about 54 degrees because he's he's just turned 54, and so looking at the main directions at the moment, I said that he's got transiting Uranus on and off, conjunct his opposition, his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So that's happening. Additionally, his solar arc directed Uranus, if we move his solar arc directed Uranus 53 degrees or 54 degrees, it comes to his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So it's actually past his Jupiter. It's actually right on his Neptune at the moment. So Uranus has been triggering this, and I think that the fact that Uranus is on his solar arc, Uranus is on his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, kind of, okay, might say something about him being Secretary of State. I mean, having Uranus on your Jupiter, which would have been the main transit when he became Secretary of State, well, that's the main direction when he was Secretary of State. Jupiter in Sagittarius, you can see, travel, broad horizons. You've got that in your natal chart. Uranus makes the direction to that Jupiter. You straight away he becomes Secretary of State, and now that Uranus is on and off is transiting that, he's starting to see the implications of that, and it's not quite as easy as it seems, and he is having to deal with his ideology and what he believes in, because he is a neocon. He has an idea about American power, and being able to defeat communism and also to defeat Russia. And even though Russia is not communist anymore, far from it. And so that direction, I think, is really quite interesting. His solar arc directed sun, his progressed sun, is at 28-29 Cancer, so he's about to get his progressed sun moving into Leo. It's possible that does give him a boost. Progressed sun moving into its own sign. I mean, that maybe sort of in a year or two. So that might be something for him to look forward to. Although I'm not entirely convinced that one can look at progressed suns moving into their own signs to think there's going to be anything wonderful happening. I don't think my progressed sun going into Leo was a bit of a damp squib. I don't think that happened a few years ago. I didn't notice anything. Certainly wasn't great, or certainly wasn't some sort of wonderful transition. That was absolutely not the case. Now he does have his north node. Yeah, the progressed directed north node is at 9 degrees 6 Aries. So he's got his directed north node opposition his Uranus, and so there's a lot of Uranus going on here, and he's right in the center of things, and he needs to be careful here because directed north node opposition his Uranus. In other words, the directed south node on his Uranus. That means that he might get himself involved in something that he absolutely doesn't want to get involved in, doesn't need to get involved in. But I mean that's something that that might happen. So those are a few thoughts on his Western chart. You can see that because I don't have his time of birth, it's really limiting. It really doesn't help. The question is, can one say anything useful about it? Is it, and that raises the question: is it worth, for example, doing someone's chart if you don't know their time of birth? I don't know about that. There is this concept of rectification, that you can use the events in someone's life to say when exactly they were born. But I have grave doubts about rectification, grave doubts about it. You can see this with if you do the way back on Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton's birth time was revealed quite recently, and you saw astrologers rectifying her chart before they knew her birth time, and a lot of them got it completely wrong. Given even though they had all these events in her life, really good astrologers were getting it wrong, and so I'm just not convinced about rectification. Now let me just finish with Vedic, his Vedic chart. I mean, so why would one look at a Vedic chart? Well, Vedic. Because if you're doing someone's Vedic chart, you really do need their time of birth. I mean, that's really important. But there is one chart in Vedic astrology that you might be able to use, and that is the Chandra Lagna chart. And the Chandra Lagna chart is where you put the when you put the moon on, you make the moon the ascendant. So this is his set for noon. Here is the Chandra Lagna chart. Now, so his moon in his Vedic chart goes back into 5 degrees 20 Cancer. So it's possible that the moon is not in sidereal Cancer, but it is in sidereal Gemini if he was born very early in the morning. So what I'm saying is assuming that his sidereal moon was in Cancer. So what we do with a Chandra Lagna chart, if we know the sign of a moon, and I think we can be 90% sure that his sidereal moon is in Cancer. Maybe more than that, maybe 90 to 95% sure. There's always a possibility, but he does have his moon in late Gemini, sidereally, that is. But if we set up the Chandra Lagna chart, that means putting a moon on the ascendant. He has got moon opposition Mars, so he's got a strong Mars in Capricorn, conjunct Rahu, in the 7th house from the moon. And that may talk about enemies. That may say something about what he gets involved with, and it's now the case that he's a Secretary of State, and I think that's slightly worrying. Just having Mars in Capricorn, in the 7th, and it being opposition the moon, and you can see he's got moon conjunct Ketu, the south node, and if that's true, you can see the desire there. There are things that he wants. He wants things badly, and then he's got Mercury Venus. He's got Mercury Venus conjunction in the 10th house from the moon, and that might sort of indicate success. I mean, Mercury Venus conjunction, he's got a Mercury Venus conjunction. We saw that in his Western chart. And this Mercury Venus conjunction goes back into Aries in the Eastern chart. And it is a sign of career success, someone being successful, being able to project themselves. And then there is the question of dashas. So do we know what dasha he is in? If he was born before 6 p.m., I think I've got this right. If he was born before 6 p.m., he is in his Venus dasha. But we don't know this for sure, because we don't know. But there's probably a 75% chance that he's in his Venus dasha. So if he's in his Venus dasha, Venus is in the 10th house of the moon. So you can see why he is so successful at the moment. Why he's a Secretary of State. His political career is, going well. Maybe this is a form of rectification. One can sort of track his Venus dasha, and the fact that his Venus is conjunct Mercury, you could say, well, that's him being a politician, talking, whatever he has to do. So that looks good. There's no way we can tell what sub-dasha he is in. What we can say is that with his Venus and his Mercury and Venus in Aries, that Saturn will go into sidereal Aries at some stage. Okay, it moves into tropical Aries next year, but sidereally, I think that Saturn doesn't really establish itself in Aries sidereally until about 2028. So 2028, transiting Saturn will move into his 10th house, and it's an Aries house. And if his Venus dasha, if he really is in his Venus dasha, I think Saturn moving into Aries would probably be very bad news. And now this might say something about his job as Secretary of State. I mean, I think there are plenty of reasons to be concerned with Uranus about to make Uranus about in his Western chart, with Uranus about to make a conjunction to his sun over the next couple of years. And, that, of course, links with the United States chart, because United States has a Gemini descendant. So the United States is about to have Uranus problems as Uranus starts to move closer and closer to the United States' descendant. So he could be getting himself into trouble there with his job in a year or two's time, maybe sooner than that. But remember, I don't have a time of birth. But, you think about 2028, this is when the Republicans are choosing a replacement for Trump. I mean, it could be earlier, of course, if Trump steps down. And, of course, the front runner is J.D. Vance. And I would not have rated Rubio's chances as being very good with as soon as Saturn moves into Aries. So I think there are many possibilities about who is going to be the candidate. I think it's almost certainly, I think from what I can see, not using astrology, just by using what I understand about politics, is that J.D. Vance is almost certain to be the front runner. And I do think that there could be difficulties between J.D. Vance and Rubio. I don't think J.D. Vance is the kind of candidate that Rubio would want to be president, and so maybe the ascendancy of J.D. Vance in 2028 will coincide with Saturn aspecting, moving into Rubio's 10th house. So I think that from what I can see, that probably Rubio's political career it may well be drawing to a close. At least this stage of it, again, I'm speculating, but I just think 27, 28, I'm not too confident, but I'm not sure, because I just don't have his time of birth. So anyway, those are a few thoughts on Marco Rubio. I don't find him particularly interesting, but just he is Secretary of State, so I think he is certainly worthy of comment. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.